Okay, so this will be about this video will be hopefully very brief. It's about chapter 4, American political culture. Now, you've probably heard this term thrown around, political culture. What does it mean? It is defined as a pattern and sustained way of thinking about how political and economic life ought to be carried out. A Frenchman named Alexis de Tocqueville, who visited the United States in the early 1800s, he himself is considered one of the best commentators on American political culture. He noticed that Americans are different in the fact that they are more democratic, and they tend to be more active in participating in their democratic system, even if our voting rate leaves much to be desired. So, compared to other Western democracies, our country is significantly more conservative. We see a stronger link between hard work and success, and we're less offended by economic inequality. This helps explain why the United States, among all developed countries, is one of the most unequal, if not the most. This is the reason why we are less off-put by rampant income inequality is the fact that is the American dream. We all think we will be rich someday, or at least our descendants will be. We're also less class conscious. We think we're all part of the middle class, even if some of us are not, either being quite poor or quite rich. We're also more into individualism and personal agency and responsibility, and we also believe in we're very firm believers in political equality. We believe that speeding tickets should be issued to presidents. We're also less differential to those in power. Obviously, you can see this in how adversarial American voters are towards their politicians. We're also more positive about our country, and thus are more patriotic. Not really surprising. We also participate more in our country's civic society, but we paradoxically vote less. So if you don't understand what I'm meaning, basically we volunteer more but vote less. We are probably the most obsessed when it comes to liberties and rights. We're also more adversarial and litigious, and we're less in the consensus. I find that's quite interesting for a very large country. It feels like you want to get along because if you don't get along in a big country, it'll fracture, but oh well. We also have a greater sense of civic competence, and we're also more religious. So, if you're wondering where the heck these differences come from, here are some possible origins. One example is goes back all the way to America's earliest days, or before America even existed. The Puritans were obsessed with sins, and the British abuse of their power spawned a distrust of unchecked power. We also had self-managed versus state-established churches, and these provided an experience with political participation as well as increasing religious participation, because self-managed churches are generally more popular and more responsive to the people's needs and demands than, say, state-established churches. This helps explain why Europe, the state often funds the churches, like the Anglican Church, for example, Britain, but people barely go to church because they don't really care about it. The churches never really cared about their needs. Whereas here, because the churches had to compete with each other, they are a lot more aggressive in terms of marketing. We also are more fragmented political authority, with federalism also added more opportunities for participation in democracy. And also, like I said, no established churches led to constructive competition for members. As a result, we had churches that were better at appealing to the masses. So, these are some patriotism statistics. As we can see, the United Americans are very, openly patriotic about our country. Unsurprisingly, Germany is the lowest. That might have something to do with the whole, crazy Nazis, Adolf Hitler killing millions of people in the Holocaust and the Second World War kind of thing. I've actually been to Germany, and the guilt over the Holocaust and the Second World War is very much present. That's why you really don't see people waving German flags around. And if you are caught waving a German flag around, people think you're a crazy or a neo-Nazi, or both. We're also less fatalistic. We have a we're also much less fatalistic. We do this. If you're wondering what this says, it basically asks the question asked to a bunch of respondents was success in life is determined by factors outside my control. As we can see, Americans are the least likely to believe in that. Interestingly, Canada is quite close with us in some of these beliefs, probably because they're quite similar in some ways, although not. It's kind of weird. Citizens should value the value of hard work. As we can see, the Americans are right up at the top. We also have a much higher percentage of our population believes that to believe in God, you need to believe in God in order to be moral. That's where our increased religiosity comes from. If you're wondering why is France, this is where, if you wonder, and this is where I was, sorry, excuse me, I am so dearly sorry for that. So, I was talking earlier about how European countries are less religious because their state-established churches were quite crap in terms of appealing to the masses. This is why you can actually see this. You can see the effect of that. Very low belief in God and its connection with morality. France is the lowest because France has, over its history, the French Republic over its history has aggressively tried to curb Catholic Church powers, but that's a different story. So, the civic role of because we're more religious, you might ask, well, what role has religion played in our civic society? And some obvious examples are the abolitionist and temperance movements and a support for civil rights, as well as the Christian coalition and moral majority. Of course, we must also talk about the not so good ones, like the fact that Christians, particularly Southern Christians like Baptists, would use Christianity to justify slavery and white supremacism. Not good. We also have, a very large amount of funding for faith-based nonprofits, especially under George W. Bush. So, thanks to our confrontation, thanks to our increased religion and our confrontational attitudes, we are known for having these culture wars. Some common issues are abortion, gay rights, guns, school prayer, drugs, and pornography. They're basically, as the name implies, as, you would surmise, they're about values and morals. They're interestingly not economic. They're all based on your cultural beliefs. This befuddled Karl Marx, who thought, every conflict in the political sphere can be explained by class struggle. No, often, one of the biggest indicator, often the strongest indicator of which side are you on these issues is your cultural beliefs. If you're very religious and very Christian, chances are you're really not gonna like this, but you're really gonna like this. So it's just interesting. The textbook that we use describes it as the struggle between the orthodox and the progressive. The orthodox, status quo, those who want to stay with the status quo, the progressives who want to push forward. Or, another way to frame it, religious right versus secular humanists. Although this isn't entirely accurate because the social left, has many devoutly religious people, whether it be Reformed Jews, Black Protestants, Latino Catholics. So it's not all, the progressives aren't always secular, but they do have a significant secular amount. They are significantly secular. We also have a huge mistrust of government. Again, we're not differential to power. We have trust declining in officials of all types. Only 10% have trust in Congress. Probably because we expect so much more government. We have such low trust because we expect so much more from government than in the past. In the 1920s, 100 years ago, at most you would expect from the government is mail delivery. That's it. Now the government does so much more. It pays for a massive military bases all over the world, a large amount of welfare. It's just much more active in the people's lives than it was in the past. Now, it's not always as much involved as, say, some European countries, but still, it's pretty actively involved. It's also partly from our more in-your-face media. Anyone who watches Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, or reads Drudge Report, or whatever, one of those sources, left or right, if you're liberal or conservative, you know what news sources I'm talking about. The media can be really aggressive and very much that in-your-face, haha, we're right, you're wrong. That doesn't contribute. That really does make things a little bit more negative, hostile. As we can see, trust in the federal government has declined precipitously from the 70s in 1958 to to the mid 20s. Now, keep in mind, let's keep this in context. This was right after the Second World War. So there was a very large. So the country was very prosperous. We had just won the Second World War. There was a lot of money flowing. There were a lot of money in people's hands. If you were white, if you were black, yeah, wasn't so great. But the drop in trust was mostly due to disastrous mistakes. Like, for example, 60s, you had with the civil rights movement, and you had the civil rights movement, and you had the another feminist movement, and those movements often generated a huge backlash, especially when the federal government acted in defense of the civil rights movement. So trust in the federal government decreased. You also got, but the biggest killer, I believe, is a combination of the escalation of the Vietnam War and how horribly that went, as well as Watergate. And of course, it starts to pick up in the 1980s with Ronald Reagan. It's morning in America. Our country's great. And it just slowly goes back up. But you also have Iran, and but then you have Iran-Contra, of course. And then of course you have the Clinton impeachment hearings, and then it goes back up, with the dot-com economic bubble, which then later pops. 2001, in the aftermath of 9/11, trust the American government is at its highest in several decades, because it's like terrorists have attacked our country, we must fight back. But then, of course, how the disastrous handling of the Iraq War, combined with revelations like all the NSA spying programs, really destroyed Americans' trust in their government. As we can see, confidence in American institutions has decreased, except for the military, which is very interesting, considering, although I wouldn't be surprised, though, because in 73, this was right on the heels of the Vietnam War, which, as we all know, did not improve, it really didn't boost people's faith in the military's handling of worldwide conflicts. But, churches, as we can see, churches have gone down, probably thanks to all those sexual abuse scandals. Public schools, not surprising why that has gone down. Newspapers, labor unions, big business, which has never really been great. Congress, yeah, we can see a giant drop. So, you've heard me throw around the term civil society. You're wondering, what the heck does that mean? So, what it basically means are like private volunteer groups that are not government or commercial or business, that work for the advancement of certain goals. Examples of groups in civil society, also known as civic groups, are the NAACP, the ACLU, and the ADL, or the Anti-Defamation League. These civil society has become more important as trust in government and big business declines. This is very important because a lot of the people who work in it have social capital or connections to the federal government, to businesses, to nonprofit, to other organizations, yada yada yada. However, civil society is weakened by our screen pathologies, or basically our addictions to technology, as well as just overall lack of care, which I understand, because especially now people are feeling really cynical on a lot of things, but we have to be motivated to do things, because otherwise, if we don't do anything, things only will get much worse. As one political scientist put it, it's like we're all just bowling alone. You also have special problems in underprivileged areas, especially in where both poor white, poor black, or just poor any community where civil society is often not present. Life expectancy is down in some areas. You also have you also have drug issues like opioid. We've heard the opiates, we've heard the crack epidemic. Those sort of things. So that is all. That was a pretty brief video. Thank you for listening.